The dark economics of anime. Why animators are broke. In almost every visible way, anime has won. It is no longer a niche export, passed around by dedicated fans through late-night television blocks, imported DVDs, or translated forum posts. It is now one of Japan's most recognizable cultural products. Streaming platforms compete for exclusive rights. Hollywood studios adapt its visual language. Global fashion brands collaborate with anime franchises. Games, toys, concerts, cafes, and exhibitions turn fictional worlds into international business ecosystems. And yet, behind many of the images that travel so easily around the world, the people drawing them often live under an entirely different economic reality. The paradox is simple. Anime can be globally successful, while animators remain economically fragile. This is not because anime is unpopular. It is not because audiences refuse to pay for it. And it is not simply because one studio, one producer, or one bad contract is ruining an otherwise healthy system. The problem is deeper than that. Anime is a modern global industry built on an older production model. It sells intellectual property, streaming value, merchandise, games, live events, and international attention. But the labor at the center of the process is often paid as if animation were still a small domestic craft business, operating on thin budgets, short deadlines, and personal sacrifice. To understand why animators are broke, we have to follow the money. Not just the money that enters anime, but the money that gets trapped, redirected, and converted into risk before it ever reaches the people who actually make the drawings move. Part 1. The product that is not really the product. A simple way to misunderstand anime is to think of each series as the product. A season of television anime appears to be a finished item. Viewers watch 12 episodes. A streaming service licenses it. A studio produces it. The audience assumes the business model is roughly similar to most entertainment. Make a show, sell the show, pay the people who made the show. But anime often works differently. For many productions, the anime itself is not the final economic destination. It is a vehicle. It can promote a manga, a light novel, a mobile game, a toy line, a music act, a tourism campaign, or an entire character franchise. Sometimes the series is profitable as video content, but often, the larger value sits outside the episodes. This matters because the party that benefits from the success of an anime is not always the party that pays for the animation labor. A publisher may gain manga sales. A music company may gain soundtrack sales and concert demand. A merchandise company may gain figures, keychains, and character goods. A game company may gain users. A streaming platform may gain subscribers. A rights holder may gain the long-term value of owning a globally recognized property. The animation studio, however, is often hired to deliver the show under a fixed production fee. That means the studio takes on the difficulty of making the anime, but may receive only a limited share of the upside if the anime becomes a hit. The better the show performs, the more valuable the property becomes, but the value can accumulate in parts of the system that are separated from the animation workers. This is the first bottleneck. Anime is a labor-intensive art form whose financial rewards are often attached to intellectual property ownership, not to the labor of production. The person who draws a difficult cut, corrects a layout, or paints an expression may help create the exact scene that makes a series famous. But fame does not automatically become income. In a system organized around rights, committees, licensing, and downstream sales, artistic contribution and economic participation are not the same thing. Part 2. The Production Committee. The structure that explains much of this is the production committee. A production committee is a group of companies that pool money to finance an anime project. Instead of one company paying for the whole show, several firms invest. A publisher, a broadcaster, a music label, a toy company, an advertising agency, a streaming partner, or other rights-related businesses. This arrangement makes sense from a risk perspective. Anime is expensive, and many titles do not become major hits. By splitting the investment, each company reduces its exposure while gaining access to the rights it cares about. The publisher wants the manga or light novel promoted. The music company wants theme songs and live events. The merchandise company wants character goods. The broadcaster wants programming. The international distributor wants streaming rights. The committee is not irrational. It is a risk management machine. But the same structure that protects investors can weaken the economic position of the animation studio. In some cases, studios are part of the committee and share in the upside. In many others, they function more like contractors. They receive a production budget and are responsible for delivering the episodes within that budget. If the project runs late, becomes more complex, or requires more corrections than expected, the pressure tends to move downward through the studio and into the labor system. The committee spreads financial risk among investors. The studio absorbs production risk. The animators absorb personal risk. This is the second bottleneck. Risk is diversified at the top and concentrated at the bottom. When a production succeeds, committee members who own rights may continue earning from the property for years. When a production becomes difficult, the immediate burden appears as overtime, low pay, rushed work, and unstable careers for the people doing the animation. This does not mean every committee is exploitative or every studio is powerless. Some studios have built stronger brands and better bargaining positions. Some projects are organized more sustainably. But the overall structure helps explain why global demand alone does not fix animator pay. Demand increases the value of anime as intellectual property. It does not automatically increase the bargaining power of animators. Part 3. The legacy of cheap television animation. Anime's labor problem also has a history. Television anime developed under intense cost constraints. Early commercial models trained the industry to produce animation quickly and cheaply for broadcast schedules. Limited animation techniques became a creative language, but they were also an economic necessity. Fewer drawings, repeated backgrounds, held frames, and stylized motion allowed studios to produce more screen time with less money. Over decades, this created a strange dual identity. Anime became visually distinctive, admired for its compositions, timing, character acting, and emotional intensity. But many of its production habits came from a world where budgets were low, schedules were tight, and the labor force was expected to endure the gap between artistic ambition and financial reality. The problem is that the ambition changed faster than the labor model. Modern anime is expected to compete globally. It must look good on high-resolution screens. It must satisfy domestic fans, international fans, licensors, streamers, merchandise partners, and social media audiences who can freeze frame every cut and compare studios in real time. Action scenes become marketing events. Opening sequences become viral clips. Character designs must support both animation and merchandise. But the underlying production pipeline still often depends on freelancers, subcontractors, and young artists who enter the industry because they love the medium, not because the economic terms make sense. Passion becomes a hidden subsidy. That phrase is important. Anime is not cheap because animation is easy. It is cheap because the system is able to draw on people who are willing to accept unstable work, long hours, and low pay in exchange for proximity to a beloved art form. This is the third bottleneck. The industry converts creative passion into economic discount. In ordinary markets, a shortage of skilled labor should raise wages. But in cultural industries, especially prestigious ones, the supply of hopeful workers can remain high even when conditions are poor. People keep entering because the work carries meaning. They want to animate. They want to contribute to a medium that shaped them. That emotional attachment gives the industry resilience, but it also delays reform. Part 4. The freelancer trap. When people talk about animators being broke, they are often talking about the conditions faced by junior and freelance animators. Many early career animators are paid per cut or per drawing, rather than receiving a stable salary comparable to other skilled professions. The exact rates vary by studio, project, role, and experience, and some workers eventually reach better positions. But the early stage can be extremely harsh. The most difficult part is that animation skill compounds slowly. A beginner may spend many hours completing work that a senior animator can do faster and better. If payment is tied to output, then the person who most needs time to learn is also the person least able to earn enough while learning. The result is a filtering mechanism that selects not only for talent, but for financial endurance. Who can survive years of low income? Who has family support? Who can live in cramped housing? Who can absorb irregular payments? Who can work through exhaustion without leaving the industry? The answer shapes who becomes an animator. This is one reason the issue is not merely moral, but structural. Low pay changes the composition of the talent pool. It pushes out people who may have had the ability to become excellent artists, but not the financial cushion to survive the training period. A healthy industry should be able to convert beginners into professionals. A fragile industry relies on beginners subsidizing their own development. The freelancer model also fragments bargaining power. A full-time employee inside a stable company has some institutional position. A scattered network of freelancers has much less. They move between projects. They depend on relationships. They may worry that complaining publicly will reduce future work. They are visible as artists, but weak as economic actors. This is the fourth bottleneck. The labor force is fragmented, while the buyers of labor are organized. Committees, publishers, platforms, and studios negotiate through companies. Individual animators negotiate through personal reputation. That imbalance matters. Part 5. outsourcing, and the illusion of infinite capacity. Anime is also not produced only inside Japan. For decades, studios have outsourced parts of the production process to overseas partners, including companies in South Korea, China, the Philippines, Vietnam, and other countries. Outsourcing can be practical and necessary. It expands capacity, distributes specialized work, and allows schedules to be met. But it can also create the illusion that anime production capacity is more flexible than it really is. When demand rises, the industry does not always respond by slowing down, raising wages, and building stronger training systems. Instead, it often tries to make more anime by stretching the pipeline. More subcontracting, more freelancers, more parallel projects, more emergency corrections, more work moved across borders. This can keep supply moving in the short term, but it does not solve the underlying scarcity of skilled labor. It simply moves pressure through the network. The global success of anime therefore produces an ironic result. More demand creates more projects. More projects create more need for animators. But if the budget structure remains constrained, the additional demand becomes workload rather than wage growth. A boom at the market level can feel like a crisis at the worker level. This is the fifth bottleneck. Industry growth increases volume before it improves conditions. And volume matters. The number of anime titles produced each year has grown dramatically compared with earlier decades. Streaming has added international competition for content. Fans expect simultaneous global access. Companies want seasonal hits. Algorithms want libraries. But animation is not infinitely scalable. It is not software that can be copied once produced. Every episode requires human judgment. Every appealing movement, every expression, every correction, every layout decision passes through skilled hands. The more the industry treats animation as scalable content, the more it collides with the reality that animation is skilled labor. Part 6. Why streaming did not automatically fix it. It would be reasonable to assume that global streaming money should have improved the situation. After all, international platforms created new demand. They introduced upfront licensing deals. They gave anime immediate access to global audiences. They made anime more visible, more convenient, and more mainstream. But visibility is not the same as redistribution. Streaming money enters through contracts. Those contracts are negotiated by rights holders, committees, distributors, and platforms. Whether that money reaches studios, and whether studios then use it to raise animator pay, depends on the structure of the deal. If a platform pays for exclusive rights, that money may strengthen the committee's financing, it may reduce risk for investors, it may increase the value of future seasons, but unless the studio owns rights or negotiates a stronger position, the labor side may see limited improvement. Again, the issue is not that money is absent, it is that money follows ownership. The global viewer experiences anime as a direct relationship. I watch the show, therefore I support the people who made it. The business reality is more indirect. Subscription revenue supports a platform. The platform pays for rights. The rights money flows through contracts. Production budgets are allocated. Labor is paid according to the terms of the production system. At each step, value can be captured before it reaches the animator. This is the sixth bottleneck. Global demand enters through rights markets, while animator pay is set in production markets. Those are related, but they are not identical. Part 7. Why studios are not always the villains. It is tempting to identify the animation studio as the villain, because the studio signs the work contracts and manages the schedule. Sometimes that criticism is deserved. Poor management, unrealistic scheduling, and abusive labor practices exist. Some studios clearly treat workers better than others. There are real differences in leadership, culture, and bargaining strategy. But a complete explanation has to recognize that many studios are themselves squeezed. If a studio accepts a fixed production fee that is too low, it must deliver within that constraint. If it refuses, another studio may take the project. If it tries to pay substantially more without gaining more revenue, its margins may disappear. If it joins the production committee, it may gain upside, but it also needs capital and must accept investment risk. This creates a difficult strategic problem. Studios need to pay workers more in order to build a sustainable workforce. But studios also need stronger negotiating power in order to pay workers more without destroying themselves. That power often comes from owning intellectual property, building a brand, producing original works, or becoming indispensable enough that committees cannot simply replace them. Some studios have attempted this. The most admired examples tend to combine artistic identity with business leverage. When a studio's name itself becomes valuable, it can negotiate differently. But that path is hard. It requires time, capital, hits, and managerial discipline. It is not available equally to every studio, and it does not automatically solve conditions for the entire industry. This is the seventh bottleneck. The most ethical outcome requires bargaining power that many studios do not have. Part 8. What would actually change the system? If the problem is structural, then the solutions also have to be structural. One solution is higher production budgets, but that alone is not enough. A bigger budget can disappear into delays, outsourcing, marketing, or investor margins unless there are mechanisms that connect it to labor compensation. Another solution is more studios owning rights. If studios participate in committees or create original intellectual property, they can benefit from the upside of success and potentially distribute that value internally. But this also shifts risk onto studios, and not every studio can afford that risk. A third solution is stronger employment models, more salaried positions, better training programs, clearer career ladders, and support for junior animators while they develop. This would treat animation less like disposable gig work and more like a skilled profession. A fourth solution is collective bargaining or industry-wide standards. If the lowest acceptable rate rises across the market, then individual animators do not have to negotiate alone. But this requires organization in a workforce that is fragmented by design. A fifth solution is consumer and platform pressure, but it has to be precise. Simply telling viewers to watch more anime is not enough. The industry already has demand. The question is whether viewers, platforms, and licensors reward companies that build sustainable production practices, and whether they are willing to tolerate fewer shows if fewer shows means better conditions. That last point is uncomfortable. A more sustainable anime industry might produce less volume. It might require longer gaps between seasons. It might make some projects more expensive. It might reduce the illusion that every successful manga can be quickly converted into an anime and streamed globally within the next content cycle. But sustainability usually means accepting limits. Part 9. The real cost of cheap anime's economic problem is not only a labor story, it is also a cultural story. The world has learned to value anime as content, as identity, as nostalgia, as fashion, as intellectual property, and as global soft power. But it has not yet learned to value the labor behind anime at the same level. That gap is the dark economics of anime. The industry can generate global excitement while local workers struggle. It can produce billion-dollar franchises while relying on people who are individually replaceable within the production chain. It can look like a national success story while functioning, for many workers, as a test of endurance.
And perhaps the most important point is this: the system is not broken because anime failed. It is under strain because anime succeeded. Success increased demand. Demand increased volume. Volume increased pressure. Pressure exposed the weakness of a model that had long depended on low budgets, fragmented labor, and creative sacrifice. The question is not whether anime will remain popular. It almost certainly will. The question is whether the people who create anime will participate in the value they help produce. If they do not, the industry may still continue. There will still be shows. There will still be hits. There will still be global fans, but the cost will be paid quietly by young artists, freelancers, production assistants, and exhausted teams whose names pass by in the credits faster than most viewers can read them. Anime has become one of Japan's most powerful cultural exports. Now the economic system behind it has to decide whether the people who make it are artists to be invested in, or simply another production cost to be minimized. That choice will shape not just the future of animators, but the future of anime itself.